Chapter 16. The day before it all starts. And flying solo on this no beta. So any mistakes are of course my own. I do read over the chapters 3 times, sometime more, but I know I don't catch everything. If you see something that doesn't make sense or is a plot hole, feel free to tell me. I do have to warn you if you got this far and it wasn't posted on the day you read it. I have a terrible habit of adding to chapters and reposting them. Thought you'd like to know. Disclaimer. I don't own anything related to Harry Potter. That privilege belonged to J.K. Rowling and all those who she lets make money for her. HPHPHP, August 31, 1991, 5 p.m. There had been a large congratulations party for all the kids who were going to Hogwarts that year. They started around noon, and the party was just breaking up. A lot of the pro-security group was staying behind. Some left as to not arouse suspicion that there were separate meetings taking place. They would be filled in tomorrow. They wanted to go over last-minute plans for the kids. It had been a fun party. The lawn was littered with party debris, and the house elves were popping in and out cleaning up as they went. The kids and their parents were all assembled in a group around a large fire. Some were making s'mores, and others were finishing off the cake that Marley had made. Butter beer and fizzy drinks were passed around, and everyone settled for what was sure to be a serious talk. After everyone from the pro-Dumbledore followers had left, they got down to business. First things first, has everyone finished packing? Wren asked, looking at all the children to get a gauge on who was paying attention. Most were, but some weren't, so she clapped her hands, and when all eyes turned to her, she asked the question again. There was a chorus of yes, ma'ams, and not yetes, causing some parents to shoot looks of approval or disappointment at those who answered. After a few chastisements and some appraisals, the group settled back down. Now that that's sorted, does everyone have their crystals and mirrors? Frank asked. Another chorus of yes, sirs sounded around the fire. He nodded in approval. Okay, a few rules, Lily said, ignoring the moans. While those items are not forbidden, they do now have rules. A letter was sent to each parent listing them. They are actually common sense and pretty easy to follow. First rule, no using the mirrors in class. Second rule, no using the mirrors in detention. Third rule, no using the crystals unless you or someone cast a silencing charm on your bed so you don't disturb you roommates, she listed, counting them off on her finger. Those aren't hard, Harry said. Then with a thoughtful look on his face added, but I will add that, in an emergency, don't hesitate to use your mirror. Not that I'm saying break the rules, he reiterated after a firm look from his mum. More like, in case you need help right away, say there's an accident in potions or something, and you or someone else needs medical attention. Maybe we can suggest to make sure Madame Pomfrey has one for just that purpose, or have one set on the wall of each class, he suggested. Lily nodded in approval along with the rest of the adults. She would owl a letter to Deputy Headmistress McGonagall tomorrow stating just that. Even volunteer to donate larger mirrors just for that purpose. Oh man, you mean we can't use them in history or detention? Man, that sucks, complained Wayne, throwing himself back in his chair with a huff, arms folding across his chest. He had been looking forward to using them to get out of boring situations. Wayne Michael Hopkins, Jean snapped, whipping her head around to glare at her son, causing a lot of the kids give off "oh" sounds. Everyone knew you were in trouble if your mum used your full name. Wayne cringed and looked to his mates to help. Most just smirked and shook their heads. Terry decided to help his friend. Mrs. Hopkins, you don't understand. History is taught by a ghost, which should have gone on years ago. He simply reads from his old notes, which are not even in the books, in a voice that puts everyone to sleep. He shrugged and sent a reassuring smile to his still cowering friend. I hate to say it, but the boy is correct, Albert said. Even he, a Ravenclaw, had had trouble staying awake in that class. I know you don't understand this being a non-magical, but that ghost is dead boring, no pun intended. However, I do understand that you don't want your child to break the rules, so here is what I'm going to tell all of you. He looked sharply around to make sure he had all the kids' attention. He did. Don't go to sleep in that class. If you can't stay awake, then read a book from a different subject. If you try and read the history book, you will still want to sleep. We don't want to give the staff any reason to take those mirrors away, and they might set another ghost on that class to watch for rule breakers. A look of understanding came across the children's faces. though there were looks of regret mixed in there as well. Wayne hadn't been the only one who wanted to skive off in that class. From what the Weasley twins had told them, it was the perfect class for that. Reluctant nods filtered around the fire as parents firmly looked at their children to make sure they understood the rules. Sirius, being the ever-loving prankster that he is, clapped his hands and got everyone's attention to him. Now that the boring rules are in place, who wants to have something fun? He asked in that voice that warned everyone that a prank was about to commence. A clamor of noise was heard as the children suddenly perked up, and a resounding response of "I do's" were all directed towards him in various degrees of excitement. He pulled out a bundle of folded parchments and started handing them out. We, Remus, James, and I, have been working on these for a few months. We didn't want to tell anyone in case we didn't get them done before you lot headed off to school, but we did, so here you are, he said with a flourish. Can anyone tell me what they are? He asked mischievously. I know what this is, Gary answered in awe. It's the Marauders map. I thought you lost yours. He quirked his head to the side in confusion. He had heard his uncles and dad complain many times that Peter had lost the only map they had. Yeah, but then we realized that we are as smart, if not smarter, than we were in school and got together to make a new and improved version of the map for you guys. Now we're not making any more for the others. Well, we might make one for those who, not defy, but come to our side. Maybe, I think that's what I mean, he said, playing with his goatee in thought. Then he shook his head to clear it and get back on track. He had learned a while ago not to encourage these kids to mischief while their parents were around. I don't want you guys to try and get the other kids in trouble with their guardians. However, if they come to you and say they don't approve of what their parents think, then get them up to date on occlumency and then talk to us about this map. This is one thing we will not be selling to the public. So you lot, make sure you hide yours well and only use it when no one is around, Sirius concluded with a steady look. Remus and James nodded their heads in agreement. They didn't want anyone to know about this item. Okay, so how do we make it work? Harry asked, already looking at the blank piece of parchment like it was the great treasure it truly was. He had already tried the old password, but it hadn't worked. Well, you know the old password, right? Harry and Gary nodded. The rest of the group looked on with eager, excited faces. We changed it to Mutineers Stand United. To activate it, to close it, the key is Unity Committed. It has the same enchantment the older one had. So you guys will be less likely to be blamed. If someone tries to reveal it without the password, then it will list our marauders' names and insult the one who cast the spell. We had to add Wormtail's name on there. Because if we didn't, it would have been too much of a clue that the group is now divided, Remus answered, quite proud of the new map. There were features on this one that weren't on the old one. They knew the Weasley twins had found the old map in Filch's, the caretaker, office, and they wanted to make sure that everyone in this group had the upper hand, so to speak. Now this map, James continued, taking Gary's map, which he had already activated along with most of the group, shows everyone in the castle on the grounds and parts of Hogsmeade, which is a bit more than the old one. It'll show all of the tunnels and hidden rooms that we knew about. You can add any others you find by standing in said room saying, "Room acquired," or tunnel as the case may be, and it will show on your map and the others. The other feature is the color coding. It'll show in green all your friends, red your enemies, tan for those you don't know, and purple the professors and staff. Now if you see a bright yellow name, stay away, that is an animagus. With Peter still out there, we didn't want to take the chance of him sneaking up on you, he warned his boys and the rest of the group. Call us on the mirrors. If you see red or yellow, Sirius took up the warning, and we'll try to find a way to get into the castle and capture them. You lot are to stay out of it. I know you've studied hard and think you can take care of yourselves, but you are still children. Let the adults handle it. If you by chance befriend a professor, you can tell them, or even if you absolutely have to, tell Snape. As much as the men in this group and Snape had come to an agreement, they were still loath to trust the man, but Lily was friends with him. She had even given him one of the secure mirrors, much to their displeasure. Okay, Padfoots, and yes, Mr. Potter and Blacks were heard. It was getting late, and the kids needed to get to bed soon. So after examining the map for a few minutes, the rest of the party broke up with a flurry of goodbyes, and see ya tomorrows. The sleepy mutineers and parents went home. The Potters, Sirius and Remus, however, went into the game room for one last bit of instruction. Sally joined them. I know you said you were going to think about it, but the time has come. What house did you decide to be in? Lily asked. They had been talking about it for months, giving reasons for one house or the other. The boys were undecided, because all of their friends would be separated into other houses, and they couldn't pick who they wanted to be with the most. Harry answered first. Well, I decided to try for Ravenclaw. If I go to Slytherin, which is where I wanted to go, there would be a hassle, and as much as I disapprove of the public's opinion on that, it would be too much. That and it would give Dumbledore ammunition to try and separate me and Gary again. All he would have to do is play the Dark Wizard card. Plus, if Gary goes where I think he is going, then that house would do the same, especially if Ron goes there as well. He hated the fact that people thought Slytherin was a house of dark wizards. He knew better. Sally had even let them talk to the ghost of Salazar Slytherin to make sure they understood why he did what he did. Then Godric Gryffindor visited and confirmed everything Slytherin said. Gary nodded his head in agreement and said, Yeah, I'm going to push for Gryffindor, for much the same reasons as Harry going into Ravenclaw. I don't want anyone to think I'm going to get out of my duty, so to speak. I mean, we've tried for years to get them to listen to us. If I go into any other house, then the press will have a field day. I'm glad you told us that we can influence the hat, Uncle Sirius. Or we would be scared out of our minds about the sorting. He too was saddened that they had to bow to the public. I know that it hurts to be separated from friends and each other because of others' opinions, but if we don't want to have to fight off stupid people, then I think you boys made the right choices, James said proudly. He knew the boys were smarter than their friends and as fiercely loyal as most the mutineers. In addition, the plans that the whole pro-security group had been making could only be construed as ambition and heroic. Most of the children in this group could get into any house they wanted. However, it had been decided among the parents that that would be a disaster waiting to happen. It would upset the balance of the student body if suddenly 19 students were sorted into the same house, like the kids wanted. It took many hours of lecturing and arguing to get them to see reason. Remember, Sally said in her cute little girl voice, it was sometimes hard to believe that she was the most powerful person in the room, with her cute face and doll-like dresses. I will be with at least one of you at all times. I will probably split half a class time between you. So if one of you is in history and the other is in potions, then I will spend the first half with Gary and the second half with Harry. I do this because Gary is the most likely to be picked on or bombarded with questions, so he will need me to be there more. I don't want you to think I'm going to neglect you, Harry. I will be there, just later, she explained with an earnest look on her face, all but begging the older twin to understand. Harry nodded his head with an understanding smile. Sally had never played favorites when they were growing up, and he knew she wasn't now. I get it, Sally. I know Gary will need you more. I'll be happy to take any time I can get with you. A pleased smile broke across that darling little face, making the room all but glow with its brightness. One last warning, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I cannot interfere with the living. I can only influence the dead. I will only be there for moral support and advice. If I see you starting to lose control, then I will be there to calm you. That's it. I want to make sure you understand that, she stated firmly, looking both boys in the eyes, making sure that they knew that their battles were their own. The only reason I can even touch you boys and your mum is because Lily has already been dead, and you boys are shrouded by prophecy. Well, only Harry, but Gary is bonded with you, so he counts too, she explained further. We understand, the boys intoned together, with the same nods of their heads, acting like the young twins they were. Now that that is settled, was there anything you guys wanted to ask before you go to bed? Remus said. He was getting tired and wanted to make sure he was up early. They had that press conference in the morning, and he knew none of them were looking forward to it. If not, then we need to talk about what we are going to tell the press in the morning, he said, putting his thoughts to words. That's easy. Me and Gary are going to agree with whatever Mum and Dad say, Harry said. He too was getting tired, and it was his night with Sally, so he wanted to get upstairs as soon as possible. Being tired made training harder. He did wonder how they were going to continue training at Hogwarts. He looked to Gary first, and then Sally, and posed the question. Sally, how are we going to continue to train at night? I wouldn't put it past the headmaster to bug our rooms, he said with a disapproving frown. He didn't want to think badly of the man, but from what Sally had told them of the kind of future they would have had, it was kinda hard not to. I know it is hard, but for all he is controlling, I doubt he would stoop so low as to evade your privacy. I will keep on the lookout in case I'm wrong, she answered him. As to your training, well, I'm going to make sure the room is secure and all your bunkmates are asleep, and then sneak you down to the common room or to an empty classroom near your dorm. You have your map, so that will help. Then I'll train you like I do now, she said with a shrug of her tiny shoulders. After the many blunders the headmaster had made with this family, there was little Sally could do to convince them that he truly did have the world's best interest at heart, and that he was just going about it wrong. The Potters weren't buying it, though. They couldn't see how separating the twins was beneficial to the world. Besides, they had done more to unite people in the last few years than Dumbledore had in all the time he had been in charge. Further discussion was had on what they were going to tell the press, which really wasn't much, just how happy they were going to be about going to Hogwarts with their friends. The parents would say how proud they were of the schooling all the kids received, and that was pretty much it. Soon the group dispersed to their own homes or beds, everyone excited and leery about what tomorrow would bring. HP, and some of you don't understand why I write Dumbledore the way I do. Well, he reminds me of an uncle I have, who acts much the same way. I love my uncle, but he thinks that the way he thinks is the only way it should be. One example is, he feels that if you're having sex with someone you should be married. Period. End of discussion. And nothing anyone says will change his mind. He is not a bad man. It is just he is so sure he is right that he has no problem letting you know how wrong you are, repeatedly. We never talk politics or religion, much for the same reason. So no matter what you tell me, I don't feel it is bashing of the headmaster, just pointing out what I feel is his way of thinking. Chapter 17. The Press Conference. And flying solo on this, no beta. So any mistakes are of course my own. I do read over the chapters 3 times, sometime more, but I know I don't catch everything. If you see something that doesn't make sense or is a plot hole, feel free to tell me. I do have to warn you if you got this far and it wasn't posted on the day you read it. I have a terrible habit of adding to chapters and reposting them, thought you'd like to know. For example, I added to the last chapter to explain a little more about Sally's influence, or lack thereof, while the boys are at Hogwarts. Simply because someone pointed out that the boys will have no reason to fight if they had death in their pocket, and that was not the impression that I wanted to give. I thought I had cleared that up in the chapter where Sally explained to the boys about death and power, but I guess I wasn't clear enough. I also didn't realize, until I got to the end of this chapter, that I put Seamus in the pro-security group, so I had to change his little scene from the last chapter to Wayne Hopkins. Nothing changed but the names of him and his mom, so you don't have to reread that part. Well, you don't have to reread anything, but I thought I would clear that mess up. I also added an author's note to explain about why I write Dumbledore the way I do, but I'll add that at the end of this chapter also, so you don't have to go back and read that. Disclaimer: I don't own anything related to Harry Potter. That privilege belonged to J.K. Rowling and all those who she lets make money for her. HP September 1, 1991 8 a.m. Come on, boys, let's get going. James hollered up the stairs. The boys were still getting dressed. They had decided to go as twins again and were searching for matching wizard wear. Since their clothes were highly influenced by the non-magical world, it was difficult for them. The only real matching wizard outfits they had were dress robes, and that was a bit much for the first day of school, press conference or no. Besides, they were going through King Cross and couldn't wear robes until they were on the platform. "Coming, Dad," came the response, followed by the sound of running feet. The boys stopped at the top of the stairs, eyebrows raised in inquiry. They were dressed in completely neutral colors. Their shoes were dress shoes, matted black. They wore matching gray slacks, white button-down shirt with the same black and white diagonal striped ties, and covered in a business-style gray jacket, which matched the slacks. Both sported the same hairstyle, which was still messy, but styled in such a way that their scars were clearly visible. It was the only way you could tell them apart, unless you got close enough to see the freckles. We decided to go neutral, neither non-magical nor magical. Did we pull it off? Gary asked, thinking they had done a pretty good job, but hating that they couldn't wear their jeans and t-shirts. They had mirror called all their friends this morning and warned them how they would be attired so that they could match with them. They wanted to present a united front, let the wizarding world know that they had friends that they would stand beside and would stand beside them. Well, I think you guys look adorable, Lily said with a beaming smile, coming up behind James. Mum, the boys exclaimed together, slight blushes painting their cheeks. No, that is not what we were going for. They then looked at each other with smirks. They had really been working on talking at the same time. Before it was only short sentences, now they could almost pull off full paragraphs. It was a work in progress. The twin ritual had helped. Don't listen to your mum. You look very handsome and very impersonal. Just what you were going for, James said, impressed. Besides, mums are supposed to talk that way. He shrugged and gestured for the boys to come down and started towards the kitchen. The boys came down the stairs and joined their parents. Trunks were brought down by the house elves and placed near the door. The Potters ate their breakfast, nervous and excited, with a smidgen of sadness. Lily was sad that her babies were going away for almost 10 months, but not as upset she would have been if they didn't have the mirrors. They discussed trivial things and gave the boys a last few pointers on what to say to the press. They gathered the trunks and paraded to a spot near the train station around 9. They wanted to be early so they could gather the mutineers before the press got there. It was when they saw that the press was already on the platform that Lily realized that she hadn't specified a time for the conference. She groaned at this mistake, then squared her shoulders, grabbed Harry's hand, and made sure James also had a hold of Gary and marched down the platform towards the front. They took a spot in front of the red Hogwarts Express engine, which would make a good photo background and contrast nicely with the boys' outfits. Lily held up her hands to stop the barrage of questions. We'll talk to you in a half an hour. We're waiting for the boys' friends to come so they can greet them. I'm sorry I didn't inform you of a time, but we've made plans and would like to follow them through. Please be patient. We will speak with you before the train leaves. Thank you, she said, and then turned her back to the crowd, ignoring the stupid reporters that didn't leave off. She did note them, however, and noticed her men folk doing the same. When the reporters noticed that they were not being answered, they did stop shouting questions, reluctantly. The mutineers and their parents' guardians were slowly trickling through the barrier. Most of the kids decided to dress similar to the twins, with the exception of the Pattles, the Weasleys, and the Bones. The Pattle twins were dressed in traditional India-style women's clothes, brightly colored, long-sleeved, multi-patterned flowing tunics, with matching scarves, and a long shimmering turquoise skirt to match. Little velvet matching slippers could be seen peeking from under the skirts. The Weasleys wore their regular hand-me-down clothes, but they did try for neutral colors of browns and grays. Well, the kids did anyway. Susan was dressed in a bright blue knee-length, short-sleeved summer dress. She had an apologetic look on her face and made an eye gesture to her aunt, who was dressed in her aura uniform. The Potters only nodded in understand. They didn't think everyone would be able to dress the way they did. As the families and the mutineers formed in a group around the Potters, you could see an almost unbroken sea of greys, black and whites. It was quite a sight. Soon it was time for the press conference, and the group turned to the impatient reporters, Potters in front. The colorful crowd of other students and parents looked on, either in interest or jealousy. Most had heard of this group, and some of the students not included were jealous, because they had to grown up away from other children their age, or with only a few friends. Parents of these children held looks of disdain, sneers predominate on their face, the Malfoys the most noticeable, Muggle schools, indeed, was the thought in those minds. James held up his hand for silence and started the conference. Thank you so much for being here. We decided that it was time to speak to you, the press. We'll be taking questions from some of you. While all of you were warned that if you didn't follow our rules, you would be excluded. So if we come across harsh, well, we won't apologize for that. If you raise your hand and you're someone we want to talk to, then when one of us will point at you, and you can ask your question. If it is something we want to answer, we will, however. If it is too personal, we will move on. You never listened to us in the past, So this is your one chance to make an impression, Lily said with a small bite in her voice, showing how unpleasant they found the press before. If you shout your questions, you will be ignored. Be warned, we do have a solicitor, and he will sue you for slander if you print anything untrue or biased, she advised. It had happened only once or twice in the past, but after a very public lawsuit, it didn't happen again. Hands flew into the air. You could almost hear the air's displacement as so many came up at the same time. James pointed at his friend Zeno. Xenophilius Lovegood, the quibbler. Tell my readers, Mr. Gary Potter, how does it feel to finally be going to a wizarding school like Hogwarts? He asked Quill at the ready. Gary stepped forwards. He could feel his friends and Barther's looks of encouragement at his back. Well, I really enjoyed going to a non-magical school, since it's where I met all the people you see behind me. We are a great group of friends. However, I am overjoyed to be going to the same school as my parents did to learn about magic, he stated in a slightly nervous voice. He stood tall and looked directly at Zeno. It was easier because he knew the man. And you, Mr. Harry Potter, do you feel the same? Zeno asked. These were prearranged questions as planned. He would be the first to ask, and then he would step aside and let the other reporters take over. I cannot express just how much me and my brother feel the same way. We are both on the same page, so to speak. Even if we are sorted into different houses, we'll still be the best of friends, Harry said with a fond look at his younger twin, who looked back with the same expression on his face. That goes for all these handsome young men and pretty young ladies behind us. We're a very strong group of friends and don't feel that division of houses should influence us, he concluded, turning with a warm smile and a small bow to the mutineers. The group of children behind them clapped and cheered to showing they too feel the same way. When the noise quieted down, Lily pointed to a rather dully dressed brunette woman. Aaliyah Conway, Daily Prophet. Tell me, Mr. James Potter, how do you and your wife feel about the children going to Hogwarts? She asked, a yellow quill taking down everything she said to it. We are so proud of Harry and Gary. They did so well in the non-magical school. They and their friends were top of the class mostly. They excelled in English and physical education. They did pretty good in the maths as well. We couldn't be prouder. We only hope they can continue being top of their class in Hogwarts, he finished with a marked glare at the two boys, who only smiled back. Lily standing with a hand on each of the boys' shoulders, showing she felt the same. Bulbs flashed in the air at the wonderful family photo opportunity. A woman with tight blonde curls and jeweled glasses pushed herself to the front of the crowd. She wore a bright green business suit, which was lined with fur. Her matching crocodile handbag slung over her shoulder, hanging in the air by her side, was an acid green quill, which was only a few shades brighter than her outfit, poised over a piece of parchment. Rita Skeeter, Daily Prophet. Tell me, Mrs. Potter, is it true that you're having an affair with Severus Snape? This question caused an uproar of voices and protest from both crowds of students and parents. After all, you were seen with him in Diagon Alley only 2 weeks ago, and it is known that you were once close friends, she added with an arched penciled-in eyebrow. Revenge was sweet. Miss Skeeter, were you not warned the last time you came around me and my family that anything you say can and will be used against you in a lawsuit? The fuming mother snapped. You will be hearing from my lawyer. Please, remove yourself from the session before I have you arrested for violating the restraining order we have against you. Lily's glare could melt metal, and her family's vicious eyes weren't far behind. The group of parents and children behind them were also glaring at the hated reporter. She was the reporter that they had had the major, public lawsuit against, when she printed that the Potters were practicing dark magic, and that is what kept baby Gary from dying. They sued the pants of her, and immediately took out a restraining order so that she was not to come within 50 feet of the Potter family or their friends. It seems this bitch never learns. She thinks because she is the Prophet's #1 gossip columnist that she can get away with anything, that and she had the new minister's ear. Little did she know that James had far more influence on the Wisengamot than Cornelius Fudge, who was only elected minister this last year, even if he did have Malfoy's money. James was well off, and he had Sirius backing him. Are you afraid to answer a simple question, Mrs. Potter? I mean, the public has a right to know, don't you think? Skeeter asked, knowing she couldn't report any of this in print, But her question was in front of the public, so the tongues would start waging no matter what this woman answered, or so she thought. While the group of unaffiliated parents' eyes started sparkling with anticipation, Rita was always good for gossip. Lily whipped her wand without hesitation and incanted, "I, Lily Marie Potter nee Evans, do hereby swear on my life and my magic that I am not having, nor have I ever had, an affair with anyone other than my husband, James Charles Potter, so mote it be." Since James had been her only lover, she was confident that there was no way this vow would hurt her. She cast the lighting spell, Lumos. Her wand tip brightened with a small ball of light, proving what she swore was true, that and the fact that she was still alive. Then she cancelled the spell with a nox, and the light went out. Lily then sent a smug look to the badly dressed woman and held her head high. Skeeter's face fell, her quill dropped to the floor. Never in 1,000 years would she have thought that such a vow could be made by Lily Evans, who had been one of the most popular girls in school. No other lovers, ever. It was unheard of. She turned to look at the crowd and saw they were all glaring at her and could actually feel her numbers drop, like a stone in a well. It would take some serious damage control to get her readers back. Rita saw the red robe moving towards her and bolted as Amelia Bones made her way through the crowd toward her. As soon as she got through the barrier, she transformed into beetle form and saw Madame Bones' very disgruntled face at missing her. She knew she would be hearing from the Potter's lawyer soon and hoped she had enough money to pay the fine. As she flew away, the only thing she could think was, well, that didn't work. I'll get you next time, Lily Potter. No one messes with me. The press meeting went on for a half an hour. No more gossip questions were asked. It was mostly what the boys felt about such and such products, like the mirrors and crystals, which they proudly told were created by their uncles and Pandora Lovegood, may she rest in peace, or which broom they felt were the best, the Nimbus. And of course, who was their favourite Quidditch team? The Scottish national Quidditch team for Gary and English national Quidditch team for Harry. What their favourite subject had been in the Muggle school, math for Gary and science for Harry. "Thank you for coming. We have to get the boys on the train. If you will excuse us," James said, finally calling the conference to a halt and shuffled the boys on to the train. Since most of the students and parents were outside the train watching the spectacle, they were one of the first on. James and Lily, pulling the trunks behind them, and led the boys to a car that didn't have compartments, just rows of benches. "You'll get a lot of traffic through here, but this is the only way that your group can stay together," James explained at the questioning looks from the twins. The boys nodded in understanding and watched as their parent put up the luggage. They had both foregone pets for now. They wanted to see where they were sorted first, and who they were sorted with, before bringing an animal to the scene. That way, if there were predators in their room, they wouldn't get a prey animal. Their parents commended them for such a smart move. The rest of the mutineers filtered in excitedly talking about the conference. They had enjoyed the way the boys brought them up in almost every answer given. That way, they didn't feel left out or abandoned by the fame. Most of them knew it would happen that way, but there were still a few that never did get over the jealousy that Gary was a celebrity. The twins took it in stride. They knew not everyone would feel the same, and as long as those few that felt that way kept it to themselves, they could overlook the small glares. They knew they treated everyone the same way, not matter what their status. The only reason they put up with the jealous ones was because of the family they belonged to, meaning that either the parents were business partners or the siblings were friends. The group settled down for a long train ride. Everyone gathered in groups mostly separated by gender, which is usual for large group, even ones composed of friends. Gary sat with Seamus, Ron and the Weasley twin, and of course their friend Lee Jordan. Soon enough Ron and Seamus separated from them, all but running to Harry and his group, which consisted of Wayne, Terry, and the Pattle twins. Lee had brought his tarantula, and Ron is deathly afraid of spiders. They were all excited and worried about what would happen at Hogwarts. They settled down to discuss as a group what would happen from here. HPHPHPN. Some of you don't understand why I write Dumbledore the way I do, and even though we won't see him until the next chapter, I thought I would explain anyway. He reminds me of an uncle I have, who acts much the same way. I love my uncle, but he thinks that the way he thinks is the only way it should be. He feels that if you are having sex with someone, you should be married. Period. End of discussion. And nothing anyone says will change his mind. He is not a bad man. It is just he is so sure he is right that he has no problem letting you know how wrong you are, repeatedly. So no matter what you tell me, I don't feel it is bashing of the headmaster, just pointing out what I feel is his way of thinking. And two, I am adding a poll on my profile. I am getting a few complaints about Sally, so I am putting up a poll as to what to do about her. Please vote on it. Update: the poll is closed, and the winner is 1. I like Sally. Leave her alone 56-55%. 2. Put her in the background 20-20%. 3. Make her grown up 17-17%. 4. Chain into a real death. Skeletal, male, dark and foreboding. 7% unique voters. 100. However, I got some great ideas on how to improve Sally to be more likable. Read and see. Chapter 18. The train ride and the planning of the hunt. And flying solo on this, no beta. So any mistakes are of course my own. I do read over the chapters 3 times, sometimes more, but I know I don't catch everything. If you see something that doesn't make sense or is a plot hole, feel free to tell me. I do have to warn you, if you got this far and it wasn't posted on the day you read it, I have a terrible habit of adding to previous chapters and reposting them. Thought you'd like to know. Disclaimer: I don't own anything related to Harry Potter. That privilege belonged to J.K. Rowling and all those who she lets make money for her. HP. As the Potter parents watched the children filter onto the train, they got thoughtful looks upon their faces. Now that the boys were off to Hogwarts, it was time. Well, James said, turning to his wife after the train departed. What now? We go hunting, Lily said, with a deadly look in her eyes, causing her to look much like the vicious woman she could be. The two turned to go home and contact the rest of the team they had put together for this hunt. Severus had really come through with the books she needed, and Sally's telling of the Horcruxes gave them just what they needed to have a nice long hunt. HP. The car was getting crowded, as all the mutineers were gathered in clutches around the seats. Animals were hooting, croaking, or meowing with the displeasure of having to be in carriers. Children were talking, loudly and with excited voices. Each group was discussing different things. Harry's group was talking about the press conference. Gary's group was talking about the sorting. They had all been told about the hat, but were sworn to secrecy. They could only tell other first years that it wouldn't hurt. Others were talking about the houses or what new friends they could bring into the group during the year. They really wanted to get more Muggle-borns. They felt if they could unite all the so-called class of wizards, they would have a better society when they graduated Hogwarts. Some of the girls, of course, were talking about clothing. I miss Luna. I'm sad she won't be here until next year. I hope her, Ellie, Astoria, and Ginny will be all right in the school. Not to mention poor Spencer, being the only boy, Parvati said, with a wistful look on her face. She really would miss her quirky friend. The rest of the girls in this group nodded. They too would miss the school and their younger friends. It'll be all right. He has some friends in his class, and Mr. Lovegood said he would take the kids home in the afternoons so they can still learn, Padma said, petting her more emotional twin on the shoulder. Besides, they all have a mirror of some sort, and you can talk to them every night and mother hen them to death, she said with a smirk, causing Parvati to mock glare at her. Brat, Parvati said clumsily, swinging at her sister. Padma just laughed and ducked out of the way. I wonder what the Potters are going to be doing. They said they couldn't take the younger ones after school anymore, that they were going too busy now that the boys won't be there. The twins, Uncle, said the same thing. What could be so important that they are bowing out like that? Alice said, a frown of consideration on her face. She knew the Potters wouldn't let the kids down unless it was something very important, but she hated not being told. I don't know, Susan said, shrugging her shoulders. Auntie thinks they're up to something sinister. I tried to tell her that the Potters weren't like that, but she wasn't listening. Her aunt was very vocal about the Potters hiding something from her. Because of Susan's comment, Padma made note to tell Harry and Gary to warn their parents that they may be watched. She didn't think that Madam Bones disliked the Potters. However, Padma felt the head Aura was protesting about being left out of something. Padma shook her head from those thoughts and noticed there was a lot of traffic through the car claimed by the mutineers, and a lot of whispers and sly looks thrown Gary's way. making the poor boy blush and glare at the same time. He really hated the whole boy who lived thing. His group of friends formed a barrier around him and glared as the offenders. People would soon learn that if they wanted to meet Gary, they would have to be polite and approach him without starstruck eyes. And if they wanted to talk, it would have to be about normal kids stuff. All his friends would tell everyone they met that. They were hoping this way more friends would be made and less fan groups. The mutineers saw Gary and Harry as normal kids and wanted the whole school to see the same. Of course, not all looks thrown Gary's way were of awe and admiration. He got plenty of looks of smugness and scorn from a lot of the purebloods. They would come into the car and look around at who the Potters surrounded themselves with and see many kids they didn't know. Therefore, if they didn't know them, they were not pure blood. And the purebloods that they did know about must be blood traitors, to be hanging around so many lesser-class children. They had all heard about the disgrace of these purebloods lowering themselves to going to a mudblood school. The purebloods that were thinking this had been grilled on who was who in the wizarding world, and anyone else was unimportant, should not be around a wizarding icon like the Potter brat. They were told by their parents to try and befriend the idiot. Most decided, after they entered the car and saw the tight-knit group, it wasn't worth their time. They would try and get him apart from all his friends at school. For every rule on human behavior, there was always one who breaks the mold. In this case, it was one Draco Malfoy. He came strutting into the car, wearing a very expensive set of black and silver robes, his white blonde hair slicked back on his head, and his loyal bodyguards at his back. He went straight to Gary's group, ignoring those he didn't know and nodding, like a prince of some sort, to the others. I heard that Gary Potter was in this car. Looking around at all the mudbloods and blood traitors, Draco drawled, ignoring the outcry from the large group around him. I feel it is my duty to inform him that he needs guidance. He finished a sneer firmly on his lips, as if he was surrounded by disgusting things. He marched up to Gary and held out his hand. I'm Malfoy, Draco Malfoy. Snickers broke out from almost everyone. Thanks to the Potter game room, everyone had watched the Bond movies at one time or another. This caused Draco's face to morph into one of confusion. These lower-class people shouldn't be laughing at him. They should be looking at him with awe. After all, his family was a very important family. He shook it off for the moment as unimportant. He had a mission to complete, given to him by his father. I can help you get to know the important people of our society. I know you have hidden away from the public in that. He paused, remembering the uproar of the use of mudblood earlier, and settled for, Muggle School and I can introduce you to the right people, he said, as he confidently held out his hand. Cries of protest filled the air, while Gary looked at the hand in front of him. He could feel his friends and brother starting to edging around him in a show of support. He had been told what to do and say if something like this came up. Draco, was it? I've heard of the Malfoys, and while your family would make great business partners, I feel, at this time, we cannot be friends. Now, if we get to know each other better, then maybe, in a few months, that might change. However, I will not be friends with someone who feels they can guide me to making better friends than the ones I already have, or someone that insults those I care about, the youngest Potter said with a small smile as he was shaking the upstart's hand in a firm, businesslike manner. After the stories told by his dad and uncles about what happened with Snape, it was decided that the boys should try and make as few enemies as possible. That way, there would be less fighting in the halls of Hogwarts and less for Dumbledore to use against the mutineers. All condescending children were to be treated with a professional manner and not to be turned down flat. It was hopeful they could turn some of these kids away from their parents' way of thinking. Draco was confused. His hand had been shaken, no insults were thrown, but his offer of friendship was turned down, for now. His father had not told him what to do in this type of situation. He knew the Potter name was just as big, if not bigger, than the Malfoys, and to make an enemy of the family could be detrimental to his father's politics. After a moment's pause, he returned the handshake in the same professional way and nodded his head twice. I will look forward to speaking with you in the future then, he said, and with one more nod of his head, he turned and walked out of the car, his head held high, ignoring the glares of a good part of the mutineers. Bodyguards flanking either side. All of the kids were told of the plan that didn't stop Ron and Seamus from protesting. They had no head for politics. They only understood that they had been insulted, and that Gary hadn't stood up for them, not catching the subtle insult Gary had laid into Malfoy. Slimy snakes, Ron muttered at the retreating backs, Seamus nodding in agreement. No matter what anyone told Ron, he would never trust anyone who would be sorted into that house. Sad shakes of heads were seen throughout the car. Glares were added from people who hated that insult. What the bloody hell, Gary? Why did you shake that slime's hand? Don't you feel the need to wash it now? Didn't you hear what he said when he came in? Ron questioned rapidly, voice rising with each one as he turned to the de facto leader of this group. A large sigh was heard from most of the kids. To tell the truth, they were getting tired of this argument. Gary turned to his friend, a sad look in his eyes. Ron, we've been over this before. We can't make enemies of anyone. We want the group to remain whole, and if we're seen fighting then, the headmaster might use it as an excuse to separate us. Don't you want to stay with your friends? Besides, you just insulted a good quarter of the people in this car, which you've called friends for the last 6 years. There are at least 2 that we know are going to be sorted into Slytherin, and many others whose parents were. Do you really think that fighting should happen over insults? Said, pleading with his entire face for this hot-headed friend to understand. If he didn't and they were in the same house, it was going to be a long 7 years. Yeah, Ron, Neville added, putting his hand on Gary's shoulder in a show of support. I don't get why you don't understand this yet. It is for the good of the mutineers that we are seen as upstanding students. United, just like our motto says. Ron looked around the car and saw that he and Seamus were the only ones that felt the way they did. He rubbed his hand through the back of his hair and tried to come up with a way to get out of the debate he had lost so many times before. Yeah, all right. Sorry, I just lost my head for a minute. He mumbled an apology and turned away to talk to Seamus and Wayne about Quidditch again, not noticing that no one believed him. After a few minutes of contemplative silence, the rest of the kids went back to cliques and started up the conversations they were having before the interruption. The rest of the train ride was fun and exciting. They had met a few more people that stayed in the car with them. There was a slightly bossy and inquisitive girl named Hermione Granger and a shy little girl who wanted to be around a large group of people her age for protection, Sally Ann Perks. Susan and Hannah took Sally Ann under their wing and drew her into the conversation they were having about dress robes. Harry and Terry were talking with Hermione about what house they wanted to be in, trying to get the girl to decide on getting sorted for who she was and not who had been in the house in the past. While the kids talked, so did the parents at the Potter Manor. There was a group of 10 people. All these particular parents didn't have jobs and had plenty of time to go hunting. The hunting team consisted of Albert Boot, Kenton Brocklehurst, Gifford Abbott, Wayne Hopkins S.R., Augusta Longbottom, the Potters, and of course, Sirius and Remus. Okay, guys, settle down, James said to the excited group. They had been making plans for a year now and were all anxious to get the show on the road, so to speak. Now that our kids or grandkid are at Hogwarts, we can get started. Everyone knows what they have to do, he asked, settling down at the table now that he had everyone's attention. I am going to be asking around about people that went to school with Tom Riddle, since they are mostly my age. I should be able to get them to spill some gossip. Most don't know he is Voldemort. I did not know, and I went to school with the man, albeit years ahead of him. However, if I mix it up with gossip of other alumni, then no one should be the wiser, the eldest Longbottom said, with a regal nodding of her head, making the vulture on her hat bob with her. I do hope you will allow me to use your name. It would make whatever I get back that much more juicier, she added, a quirk of her grey eyebrow. Of course, James said with a tight smile. Just don't slander us, keep our secrets, and we'll be fine. Yes, said Lily in agreement. That's the perfect job for you. Use our name, but try and keep the boys out of it. You can talk about their schooling and friends, but that's it. Trust you, Augusta, and the more we know about Tom's whereabouts after he left Hogwarts, the better we can decide where to look and what to look for, she stated, then turned to the rest of the team. Albert and I are on research. Severus really came through for me with the books I needed. She ignored the disgruntled looks from the marauders. It was the reason she had been spotted by Skeeter in the alley. She was thankful that vile bug of a woman didn't get a close enough look as what they were doing or discussing. She would have to meet him somewhere more private in the future. Maybe the Shrieking Shack. It was close to his work, and there were plenty of reasons Lily could be in Hogsmeade. Yes, and while you ladies and gentlemen do that, we're going to take that doodad that Lily made and scout as much of Britain as possible. When the research and gossip teams come up with a location, we'll go there right away. Until then, I think we should do some visiting on our own. We'll start with Grimmauld Place, since everyone is dead now, Sirius said, talking about the point me crystal that found dark magic. The darker the magic, the more it vibrated. So if it wasn't vibrating hard, then they could ignore what it is pointing to. They had tested it last month in Nocturne Alley. It was a simple design, a black crystal, 5 inches long, about a finger's width. In that dark alley, the thing went off at every store. They discovered that a few stores weren't as dark as they were told they were. There was even some niffy stuff in them, which didn't make the crystal go off at all. Sirius had talked to the owners about the meditation crystals and mirrors in those shops. James' voice brought Sirius back to the discussion. It's going to be a long year. Britain isn't small, and we're going about this willy-nilly. But it's the only plan we have until we get more information. That's where you three come in. Hopefully we can find at least one of these things before the year is out, James said seriously. He waved it off a moment later and said, "Don't forget to go home to your family every night. I think we have some time before the Dark Wanker returns. So talk to your kids or grandkid and spouses. Don't let this hunt take up all your time. If we hear anything that makes us believe that we need to pick up the pace, we'll let all of you and the other parents know." The team split up. Augusta went home and started making flu calls to set up teas. Lily and Albert went to a room on the top floor that they had set up as a study. This particular room had a hidden bookshelf in the wall, hidden the Muggle way with a sliding panel. You had to press the correct spot on the wall for it to slide open. The books that Severus had retrieved for her were dark, and she didn't want anyone to know they were in the house. She put up the magic null spell on the room, so all the dark magic on the books was inert and couldn't be detected with any spells used to find magical items. The rest of the men sat in the dining room and pored over a map of Britain, planning out their strategy. HP for those of you not new to the story, so sorry for the double post of this, and want to know the results of the poll they are. In Potter Stand United there is an arc, Sally or Death. I have been getting a few complaints about her, so what should I do? One, I like Sally. Leave her alone 56-55% 2. Put her in the background 20-20% 3. Make her grown up 17% 4 chain. Into a real death, skeletal, male, dark and foreboding. 7% unique voters. 100 I did get some cool ideas in the comments. So watch for a few non-drastic changes.